Hello, good people, and welcome to my first video of 2021. Today, as you can probably already tell, we are going to be setting up my 2021 bullet journal. Before we jump into the setup of this notebook, let's talk about the notebook itself. So, as you can see from the packaging, I purchased the official bullet journal notebook in the second edition, which is basically a Leuchtturm 1917 notebook, but like times 10. It comes with this super cool guide that has like tips and tricks on how to bullet journal. So if you are new to bullet journaling, this could be super helpful to you. But these tips are all pulled from writer Carol's book that came out I think a year or two ago called The Bullet Journal Method. So if you own or read that book, no worries if you don't also have the guide that comes with this notebook. The notebook has been sold out. As you can see, I purchased it in this pink blush color, which is definitely not my usual color vibe, but literally they sold out like faster than I could have imagined. But there are some key things about this new notebook that really sold me, even though I had to get it in a color I don't love. So the first thing is it has this thing called a smart grid, which basically means there are these dots on the pages that help you easily divide the pages into quarters, thirds, halves, which is helpful if you're setting up things like timetables or just need to divide your page for whatever reason. It also has a better paper quality than the typical Leuchtturm notebook. So a regular Leuchtturm notebook is, I think, 90 GSM paper. This paper is 120 GSM. So those features alone really just sold me. And I just love a Leuchtturm notebook. I love the way that they last throughout a year. And I'm all for these little upgrades. So when you pull the notebook out, they do have like a little explainer talking about all the new features of the notebook. Like I mentioned, they have that smart grid feature. They have larger borders around the page. So if you need more space to write your headers or whatever, they have that. The paper quality is better. It comes with stickers this year, which I don't really need or use, but is a nice feature. Like, it's just a really souped up notebook. And I will say that one thing I didn't realize they changed that I don't love is that the index is now just a dot grid page. I'll show you what it looks like before. Also, the dots are super, super light in this notebook. So if you have trouble seeing the dots, like usually this one might not be for you if you are someone who struggles with just like vision in general. I think it's super light and the page numbers are super light. So those are just things to consider, but overall I love the new features of this notebook. So when you open the notebook, there is, like I mentioned, that smart grid. There's a whole like grid spacing printout right on the cover, which is helpful. So if you need to know how many dots across or down the notebook pages are, or how to divide your page into sections, you can just reference this right on the cover, which is super handy. Now, you all know by now that my approach to bullet journaling is super, super simple. It doesn't take a ton of supplies or even a ton of know-how. I just need to kind of get like function over everything down. So in this setup, I'll be using these Sharpie S-Note markers, which you see on my desk, a clear ruler for when I need to make straight lines, and and a black gel pen. So I'm just here going ahead and putting my name and the year at the front of the notebook. I love this, just setting up a new notebook feels so good. And then when you flip the page, the first page that you'll see on the other side is a key. This is pretty standard in all bullet journals, but I don't really need it because I know my system by now. I don't really reference the key, but it breaks down just what symbols things mean in the traditional bullet journal method. And if you were to change any symbols or add any symbols, you would note that here. And then another new feature of this notebook is that it left the first page blank, and you can't see it because the writing is so light, but it is a page to leave like some intentions for the notebook, for the year, what have you. So I hadn't finished goal planning at this point, so I'm just putting a post-it note here so I know to go back to this page and write some intentions or mantras or goals that I want to keep at the front of my notebook. All right, and now we're jumping into one of the most basic and standard bullet journal pages, and that is your index. The index is essentially a table of contents, but they've changed it like I mentioned. So in previous Leuchtturm notebooks, the index looked like this. It had lines to kind of guide you on where to write the page title, where to write the page number. But in the new notebook, they've done away with this, and it's just a blank dot grid page. And they did that because people who do tend to get more artistic with their bullet journals or wanted more flexibility, they can have that in a grid page versus just your typical like table page. So now there's just these 4 blank pages that you can log everything that you write in your bullet journal. So for me, I don't tend to write things like my January calendar or what have you, things I know I'm going to do in my journal, but I do list any note pages or ideas or things I want to come back to and log them all in that index. So I really rely on that table of contents, and that's why I love having a notebook that has page numbers in it. It's super, super important to me. So my spread is pretty minimal for the year when I set up my year in a new bullet journal, but I do like to keep a consistent color scheme. So these are the 3 colors I'll be using in my yearly setup. They are Sharpie S-Note highlighters, which I really like, and they don't bleed through this paper at all. This new, better paper quality from the Bullet Journal Edition 2 is fantastic. Like, there's always been some ghosting or maybe some bleed through depending on the pens or marker you use in a Leuchtturm notebook, but this notebook completely cuts that out without, that stiff cardboard paper feeling that I hate. So I'm really impressed with the paper quality. But here's just a breakdown of the colors I'm going to be using in my yearly setup. I wanted to go with kind of like a fun metallic thing. I just thought it was really symbolic of like the new year, and it's bright and fresh and hopeful, and that is all I want for 2021. So I love these colors together, and I thought they complement each other really well. So now I'm just moving on to set up the future log. The future log is essentially where you put things that are happening outside of the current month that you're planning. So if it's January and you're planning an event in August, or you have birthdays you want to log, you would do them all in your future log. I've been doing my future log in this format for about 3 bullet journals now, and it definitely is just the one that works the best for me. So all I do is I split each page into 3 columns, so they'll have 3 months on each page, and I go down and I write a mini calendar at the top of the page. Now, I'm not an elaborate bullet journalist, but I will admit that setting up this spread takes some time. It is a little time consuming, a little monotonous, and if you are a hand cramper, just brace yourself, because writing a ton of mini calendars over and over and over is no joke. But it's actually way easier now that you have this smart guide grid on the bottom of the page, because I could clearly see where I needed to split the page, where I needed to start writing, so that I had 3 equal width columns across the board. Next, I'm just grabbing this grayish colored Zebra Sarasa clip pen. It's just a really fun, like, muted gray that I thought complemented the other colors really well. And I'm going over each mini calendar and just writing in the date with this pen so that they're clearly labeled dates. Pretty straightforward, pretty basic. And now, just to bring in those 3 colors that I talked about earlier, I'm taking the Sharpie S-Note highlighters again and just adding the number that corresponds with the month that matches the calendar. That was a tongue twister, but I'm basically just doing it in a pattern where I'll be able to use every color for every other month. It just adds a cute little pop, ties it all together, makes it look nice, and this is quite frankly the cutest and most elaborate that you'll see me get with a bullet journal, is adding a little bit of a color scheme. But like I said, the future log is something that I use not only like the most consistently, but I really rely on it for when I need to log events, deadlines, projects, birthdays, whatever happening in months that I'm not currently planning in. So I love this spread. I'm super happy with the way that it came out. It's easy. Those calendars are tedious, but it is worth it when it's finished. The good news is, now that the future log is done, we are almost completely through. Well, not completely, but we got a big chunk of the setup done. On this blank page, I'm using another Post-it to leave a placeholder for my word of the year. I pick a word of the year almost every year. I didn't know what that word was going to be when I was setting up my journal, but I think I've decided that my word of the year for 2021 is faith, because I just want my whole year to be guided by faith. Faith in God, faith in my potential, faith in myself and my abilities, just confidence and assurance that comes from some place that is a little bit more divine than I am. On the following page, I'm just writing a header at the top that says period tracker because I am making a year-long period tracker. Like I said, my bullet journals are really simple, but when I want to do like a header that stands out, I usually do them in this style, which is just right at the top of the page, draw a rectangle around it, and then take a color and make kind of like a drop shadow around it. So the header does pop a little bit, it stands out a little bit, but it's still super minimal and simple. Nothing too crazy here. That is the theme for this whole setup. So the point of this is basically what it sounds like, to track your period. Of course, there are apps and calendars and different methods and techniques you can use, but I like this because I always have my bullet journal with me. And when you go to the doctor and they're like, when was the last time you had your period? Was there anything weird? I can always just pull out my notebook and reference this spread. So what you're seeing me do, I'm writing the numbers 1 through 31 vertically down the page, and then horizontally across the page, I write the first letter of all 12 months of the year. That way I can color in each of the boxes you're going to see me make to indicate the time that I did have my period, and in the remaining space on the page, I can use that to write any notes. So if there was anything abnormal or just things that I feel like I want to note and track and keep an eye on, I can have it all on one spread. This is definitely another one of those spreads that is time consuming to do and requires a lot of page flipping, but is worth it when it's finished. Alright, and these final spreads of my setup are quite literally the most basic, simple, and easy spreads I could do because I'm only writing titles on these pages. In 2018, I started a new spread where I would keep track of new words. So you guys know I read a lot of books. As I was reading, I would just go through and write out new words that I had to look up, trying to just, be a smart girl, grow my vocabulary. So this page is literally just called New Words, and it's quite frankly where I write new words and their definitions. And throughout the year, I'll hopefully fill this page up, and if I need additional pages, I'll just add them in my bullet journal and track them in the index. And this final page, similar to New Words, is a new to me spread. So I'm declaring 2021 the year that I finally take French lessons, because you all know I love Paris, and when the world is less contagious and more open, I hope I get to go back. I want to go and sound less like an American. So similarly to my New Words page, I'm doing a spread for French words, like very basic French words that I'm studying, hopefully pronouncing well, and just want to add into my vocabulary. And to wrap things up, I'm just going back into that index page. Again, the writing is super light, so you can't see that it says index at the top of the page. I'm just going in and adding all of the spreads I just made into that table of contents so that I can find them later. One thing I didn't really show you guys in this setup is my migration process. So basically, migrating spreads in bullet journaling means that you take things you set up in an old notebook and move them to a new one. I pretty much do that over time. I don't always do it at the start of a new setup, but that is something that I will be reaching for my old notebook for and bringing all those good spreads I used throughout the year in 2020 into 2021. And this final page I'm setting up is a page I do in every notebook I've ever had. I do it on the very last page of the notebook, and I make a pen test page. So if I'm trying a new marker, highlighter, gel pen, whatever, I can test it on this back page and know that it won't bleed through all of my other pages. And then I just flip back to the front of my notebook and start filling in dates that I need into my future log. So these are all things that were like scattered in my old notebook that I need to now track in this notebook. And here is a flip through of my final bullet journal setup. So that's all I have for you for this 2021 bullet journal setup. I hope it was helpful. I will link everything I use down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.
Is this what you want now? Feels like you're looking for something.